The Leica Q2 was launched in 2019 and has been an extremely popular everyday carry camera with many photographers ever since. But last year, Leica launched the Q3, a successor to the Q2, with quite a lot of improvements compared to the older camera. Some of them quite significant and some of them quite minor. So if you've got a Q2 and you're thinking of upgrading to the Q3, or maybe you're just considering buying a second-hand Q2 or a brand new Q3 and can't decide, today's video is for you, because today I'm going to take a look at all the improvements the Q3 has to offer to help you decide which one is the one for you. So let's get into it. So just to be clear, this is not going to be a review of the Q3 or the Q2. It's simply a comparison between the two to help people decide which one to choose or whether to upgrade. So the Q series of cameras from Leica was launched in 2015 with the original Leica Q, and it had a 24 megapixel sensor, and like the Q2 and the Q3, it's a camera with an integrated lens, which means that the lens is fixed to the body and can't be changed, and it's a 28mm Summilux f1.7, so very fast lens and fairly wide compared to say a Fuji X100, which is a 35mm equivalent. And very importantly, the Q, the Q2 and the Q3 are all full frame sensor cameras, and ever since the Leica Q, the lens has not changed, so it's the same lens. Even on the Q3 it's exactly the same lens. What's different is the sensor and of course many other things which I can get into now. The Q3 comes with an LCD screen that can tilt, which means that you can take photos from a very low angle and still be able to see what you're photographing. This is something that a lot of Leica Q users have been asking for a long time, especially given that many of its competitors, like the Fuji X100, now comes with a similar kind of tilt screen. The screen also is a higher resolution screen, so it's gone from around 1.04 million pixels to 1.8 million pixels. Personally, I never felt that the LCD screen on the Q2 was in any need of any improvement, so for me that's not a huge benefit. Another major change for the Q3 is the introduction of phase detection autofocus. So not face detection, although it has that as well, but phase detection, as opposed to the Q2 and the Q, which only had contrast detection autofocus. But in some situations, such as low light for example, or fast moving, fast action situations, the phase detection will be faster and more accurate. And in order to facilitate the phase detection autofocus, the Leica Q3 also comes with the latest generation Maestro IV chip, whereas the Q2 uses the older Maestro II chip. This will also speed things up for things like just previewing photos on the screen and things like that. But the main benefit of the faster chip is really to drive that phase detection autofocus. And it may seem like a minor improvement, but for me this is actually one of the things I would have quite liked to have had on my Q2. And that's the addition of a USB-C port and an HDMI port. That means that you have better connectivity with the Q3. And for me specifically, the ability to charge the camera battery while it's still in the camera and not have to take it out would have been a nice feature to have on the Q2. So those are actually three of the bigger changes to the Q3 over the Q2. But there's actually quite a lot of minor ones which I also want to get into, because although they're minor, for you they may be significant. So firstly, the battery. The Q3 battery has actually been upgraded, so it's the same physical size, but it is actually more powerful. So the Q2 came with the BP SCL4 battery, which has a rating of 1860 milliamperes, whereas the Q3 comes with the BP SCL6 battery, and that has a slightly higher rating of 2200 milliamperes. And very interestingly, the new battery with the higher performance actually costs less. So there's charging, I believe it's around $150 for the newer battery for the Q3, and the old Q2 battery is going to cost you around $200. And just as an aside, if you do have a Q2 and lots of batteries and you're upgrading to the Q3, the Q2 batteries do actually work in the new Q3, but strangely if you're shooting 8K video, the old Q2 battery will not work. But if you're just using basic functions in the Q3, the Q2 batteries will work. So if you want to keep your old Q2 batteries and upgrade, you can do. I've already talked about the screen, but the EVF, the electronic viewfinder, has also had an upgrade in terms of resolution. So it's gone from 3.68 megapixels to 5.76 megapixels. But for me, again, as with the LCD screen, I've never really thought that the EVF resolution was lacking in any way. So for me, that's not a massive benefit for the Q3. In terms of video, the Q3 can now actually shoot in 8K video, so that's very, very high definition. But I have to say that for me, and I think for most people, the Q series of cameras is really not an ideal video camera. So if video is your primary use of a camera, I think there are a lot of other choices that are available ahead of the Q series. So actually increasing the resolution for me is, again, it's a nice to have, but it's not something that would really appeal to me personally, because I think if you're going to shoot 8K video, it means you're doing some pretty serious video work, and that's not something that I would do, and if I did, I think I would have a different camera for that. One reason would be that even with the Q3 and also the Q2, of course, there is actually no way to attach an external mic. There is no mic port in the camera, and there are ways around that. So for example, you could record audio separately in a separate audio recorder and then merge the audio with the video from the camera in post-production. But if you're a serious and frequent video user, that's quite an inconvenience, and it would really be better to have a separate port for the external microphone on the camera. In terms of burst mode, the Q3 now can do up to 15 frames per second, as opposed to the Q2, which could only do 10. I, again, rarely use burst mode for street photography. It's not really necessary, or if it is, then 10 frames per second is actually more than enough. If you shoot a lot of low light photography, or street photos at night time, for example, the Q3 does have better low light capability. So the Q2 isn't so great, although with certain adjustments, for example, you can denoise in Lightroom or in any other software that you're using. I find I can get the results I need in low light eventually, but it's nice to know that the Q3 will have a better capability straight out of the camera. If you use the optional camera grip with the Q3, it also has the ability for wireless charging. So if you have a wireless charging mat and the grip, you can actually just place the camera on the mat and it can start charging. For me, again, really not a massive benefit. Nice to have maybe, but I wouldn't upgrade for that. And although the sensor is a higher megapixel sensor, so it's 47 megapixels on the Q2 versus 60 megapixels on the Q3, if you want to save on disk space for example, for photos that maybe aren't that important to you, you can do that on the Q3 because it has actually 3 modes of resolution. So you can shoot at 18.5 megapixels, 36.4 megapixels, or the full 60.3 megapixels. So those are the key improvements on the Q3 over the Q2. Believe it or not, there are actually some disadvantages of the Q3 over the Q2. One of them, of course, is the price. So a new Q3 is around $6,000 and a Q2 on the second-hand market now, they're going for around $3,500–4,000. So you're saving around $2,000 by going with the Q2, and for many people that's not an insignificant amount of money. The Q3 is slightly heavier than the Q2, so we're looking at 743 grams versus the 734 grams for the Q2. Not really a massive difference, and that's not that surprising considering the body is more or less identical. And something that did surprise me is that the electronic shutter speed on the Q3 is actually not as fast as the Q2. On electronic shutter mode, the Q2 can shoot at 1/40,000 frames per second, which is amazing, whereas the Q3 can only do 1/16,000th of a second. For me, that difference is not really that significant. I actually never use electronic shutter, and I would probably never need a shutter speed of 1/40,000th of a second. So there are a few more features of the Q3 that I haven't covered, but they're very, very minor. So that's really a rundown of all the new features and benefits that the new Q3 offers over the Q2. So if you're deciding between the two or thinking of upgrading your Q2 to a Q3, which one should you choose? Well, of course, that really depends entirely on your specific situation. How important is the faster face detection? Is the tilt screen something that's important to you? Do you need an HDMI and USB-C port? And I think very importantly, how significant is the price difference of the Q2 secondhand versus the brand new Q3? And I think only you can answer that question for yourself. For me personally, it's a no-brainer. I would love to have some of the benefits that the Q3 has to offer, but really none of them are significant enough to make me consider selling my Q2, finding another $2,000 and upgrading to the newer model. So there you have it. Please let me know in the comments which one you decided to go with and whether you're happy with your decision. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.